Have you ever looked up at the night sky and wondered if we're truly alone? For one family, that question was answered in the most terrifying way imaginable. This is the story of a single night of horror that changed their lives forever. The Petersons lived in a remote farmhouse, miles away from the nearest neighbor. Surrounded by vast fields and dense woods, the isolation was peaceful during the day but unsettling after dark. On this particular evening, a soft breeze rustled the leaves and the stars blanketed the sky. It was supposed to be just another quiet night. Emily Peterson, a 12-year-old with an insatiable curiosity, was the first to see it. She had been lying on her bed, staring out the window, when something caught her eye. A bright light, far too close to be a star, hovered above the treetops. At first, she thought it might be a plane, but it moved too erratically, darting left, then right, then stopping entirely. "Mom, Dad, come look," she called, her voice tinged with both excitement and fear. Her parents, Mark and Linda, joined her at the window. Mark squinted, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. "It's probably just a drone," he said, though his tone lacked conviction. But the light grew brighter, and then it began to descend. Slowly, methodically, it lowered itself into the field behind their house. Mark grabbed a flashlight and headed out, despite Linda's protests. Emily followed, unable to suppress her curiosity. The field was eerily silent as they approached the light. It wasn't a drone. It wasn't anything they'd ever seen before. A metallic object, smooth and seamless, hovered just above the ground. It pulsed with an otherworldly glow, casting long, strange shadows across the grass. "Dad," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. "What is it?" Before Mark could answer, a low hum filled the air, vibrating deep in their chests. The flashlight flickered, then died. The hum grew louder, almost deafening, and the light from the object intensified until they had to shield their eyes. Then, everything went black. When Emily opened her eyes, she was back in her bed. Her heart raced as she tried to piece together what had happened. The clock on her nightstand read 4:33 a.m. She didn't remember walking back to the house. She didn't remember anything after the light. She got up and went to her parents' room, but they weren't there. Panic set in. She searched the entire house, calling their names, but the only response was silence. The front door was ajar, swinging slightly in the breeze. Emily stepped outside, the cool night air biting at her skin. That's when she saw them. Her parents stood in the middle of the field, facing the woods. Their heads were tilted back unnaturally, their arms hanging limp at their sides. She called out to them, but they didn't respond. She approached cautiously, her bare feet crunching on the frosted grass. As she got closer, she saw that their eyes were wide open, staring blankly at the sky. Mark's lips moved, but the words were barely audible. "They're coming," he whispered. "They're already here." Suddenly, a piercing noise filled the air, like metal scraping against metal. Emily clapped her hands over her ears, dropping to her knees. The noise stopped as abruptly as it had started, replaced by a deep silence that felt heavier than the loudest sound. And then she saw them. Figures emerged from the woods, tall and thin, their skin pale and almost translucent. Their heads were elongated, with large, almond-shaped eyes that reflected the light from the hovering object. They moved in unison, gliding rather than walking, their movements unnaturally smooth. Emily wanted to run, but her body refused to move. One of the figures turned its gaze toward her, and in that moment she felt completely exposed, as if it could see every thought, every fear she'd ever had. The figure raised a hand, and a beam of light shot from the object in the field, enveloping her parents. They began to rise, their bodies limp and weightless. Emily screamed, the sound tearing from her throat, but there was no one to hear it. The next thing she knew, she was back in her bed again. The clock read 6 a.m. Sunlight streamed through the window, and the house was silent. Her parents were in the kitchen, acting as if nothing had happened. "You okay, sweetie?" Linda asked, noticing Emily's pale face. Emily stared at them, her mind racing. Had it all been a dream? But when she looked out the window, she saw it. The grass in the field was burned in a perfect circle, the edges still smoldering. She knew then that it had been real. That night, Emily didn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the sky, waiting for the light to return. She didn't know what they wanted or why they'd come, but she knew one thing for sure. They weren't done with her family. If this story sent chills down your spine, hit subscribe for more terrifying tales. And when you're ready, there's another story waiting for you, one that's even more unsettling.